Hey, what's up, my friends? Welcome back to another episode of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. Today, we have a very beautiful episode that I'm super excited to share with you because we've got one of my dearest friends on the show today who I arguably think is one of the most well-studied people inside of the spirituality, self-development, shadow work space. And what's really cool about him is that he has an entirely different view on shadow work and how to meet the darkest parts of yourself, the most dense parts of yourself, the parts of you that you want to hate, that you shame, that self-sabotage you. Is a very interesting and beautiful perspective on how to meet those parts of you with love and compassion and grace and really integrate them into the wholeness of your being. So today we have Nathan Kohlerman on the show, and I'm also very excited to announce that we filmed this episode a year ago. We've been friends for quite some time, and between then and now, he has written and officially released his very first book, Between Two Worlds. And I had the privilege and pleasure of getting to see the behind the scenes of him writing this book. And it's all about how to navigate life, death, and suicide, which I know sounds very dark and dense, but the way that he brings these concepts together and the way that he's able to share his experience of the darkest corners of his mind. His brand is literally Spiritual Psychopath. So it goes very well with It's Fucking Spiritual and embracing this entire human journey. His book was released literally last week and is already shot to #1 on the Amazon bestsellers list for how to cope with grief. So very, very excited to be bringing you this episode, bringing you Nathan's wisdom. And if you want to get his book, check it out in the show notes. It's going to be a really good one.
What if I can just laugh about my inner psychopath? Whoa, I just removed all these stories around how people are going to judge me and criticize me, or how I don't fit in. This story I've been telling myself since I was like 6 years old when I first got bullied, right? And that narrative started running, and then not feeling like I fit in, not feeling like I'm a cool kid, not feeling like anybody's going to love the real me or who I really am. But when I really start looking at this like dark, playful piece, right? Because there's a misconception that darkness is immediately associated to something negative.
Yeah.
Where inherently, right, both negative and positive hold value.
We're back, baby, with a brand new season of the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. Join us each week as we have unfiltered conversations about how to transform your life. Our mission is to usher in a new era of spirituality where you don't have to be all love and light to live a life of alignment. Here, we honor all of it, the profound and the profane, the magic and the messy, and all things that make you human. So let's discuss the truth behind transformation and be unapologetic in our evolution. From manifestation to money, embodiment to energy, and all taboo topics, nothing is going to be off limits. Are you ready to live a life that feels just as good as it looks? Let's get fucking spiritual. Welcome back to the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. Today, I am so excited for the guest that we are bringing to you. He is a facilitator, a coach, a speaker, and truly an expert in everything from psychology to somatic healing to nervous system regulation. He is even a reverend, okay? This guy knows really more than anyone else I've ever spoken to in the realm of personal healing. And he also happens to be a dear friend of mine. So I'm very excited for Nathan Kohlerman to be joining us on the podcast today. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Oh, hello.
Oh, hello.
I am ready.
I am so excited to have you on today. And we are such great friends and have done a lot of this work together in spaces. And I'm just so excited to bring your knowledge, your wisdom, and expertise to the show because I have never met anyone that has more knowledge and more wisdom than you when it comes to really the intersection of spirituality, mysticism, all things woo, and science, which is all the things that we're about here on the show. So I'm excited to dive in. And before we even start today, you also have a crazy story. So I want us to just start there with how you even became who you are today in doing this deep work. And just tell us from the beginning, kind of the journey that you've been on.
All right. Dropping right in.
Dropping right in. Yeah.
So, yeah, I grew up in a really, really chaotic home. I have said this before, but I've experienced trauma since quite literally from within the womb. Some very, very deep, dark things in my family that had shown up. And through the progression of my life and adolescence, having the abuse and the chaos and everything else, and you sprinkle in some humiliation and bullying, it's just a recipe for disaster. So that was what the first 14 years looked like, just feeling completely lost, completely alone, not knowing really what love was, unless it came in the form of a punch or some type of passive aggressive comment, which of course I adopted, and I've had to work through those things. And after my parents divorced, and when I was 14, that's kind of when I went off the wagon a little bit, a lot of it. And being in martial arts since I was 5 years old, I was already well equipped, and I started fighting a lot. And I hurt a lot of people for reasons beyond what I knew then, because I just had so much pain. And I was just so angry with the world. I was angry with my family. I was angry with myself. And that attracted the attention from gangs. And they saw a use for it. So they reeled me in as an enforcer, and I did that work for a few years, getting into drugs, drinking all the time, breaking into cars, being the manipulative and deceptive human to get whatever I want, when I wanted, how I wanted it. And that got me onto the path of heroin eventually. And that was some real deep, dark shit. And that became my life. I obsessed about it. It was the first thing I would think about when I'd wake up. It's the first thing that I would think about when it comes to what I wanted. Oh, I want to hit. I want the thing that'll help me feel better, that'll help me feel normal, because I never felt normal, Mm-hmm. And I remember this time around Christmas 2009 where I had reached out to my sister asking for help, because maybe a week or two before that, we got a back window shot out, and after a robbery, clearly, and the bullet hole was right in front of me, and I'm looking at it in the dashboard. Mind you, I'm like 17 years old, and we got away, and we were like, oh, that was so close. And then when I got home, it really set in, and I was like, yo, what the fuck am I doing? Like, I could have died. Like, is this really all worth it? And the answer was no, clearly not. So I needed help. So I reached out to my sister. They sat me down, and my mom told me, right, like, if you don't stop what you're doing, you're going to be in debt or prison. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. Kind of brushed it off. I showed up to school because I was going to this alternative charter school, because I got kicked out of so many schools that I went to this school that was nicknamed Asshole's Last Chance, ALC, Accelerated Learning Center. Funny and also not funny.
Yeah.
So I walk in, and there are two Army recruiters just standing on the doorstep. And I was like, I don't know why, but I feel like this is the right move. Because my dad was a Marine, his dad was a Marine, come from a long lineage of, priests, warriors, all that jazz. And I told him straight up, like, I'm not good right now, but I need something. I need something, because I can't do this. And they helped me a lot. They helped me get on the right path. And when I left for the military, of course, it took me a while to adopt the lifestyle of order without chaos. So I decided to create it, as naturally we do. And yeah, I got in trouble a lot. I got demoted 7 weeks into basic training for disrespecting a senior non-commissioned officer. Didn't learn my lesson then. And I didn't really learn my lesson until my 19th birthday. I went out drinking. We were in Korea, so you pretty much just got to be as tall as the bar to drink, kind of like Mexico. And I saw these two guys, and they were trying to pull a girl away out of the bar. So, of course, 19-year-old soldier Nathan, who, feels like he's the knight in shining armor now, decides to step in, and I hurt them really badly. Put them both in the hospital, to the point where one guy had to get his jaw rewired shut, might have had permanent brain damage for all I know. And that's when Sergeant Major called me in the next day and basically told me, like, you're going to go to jail. Like, you're going to get court-martialed. And we're going to make sure we see it through. So luckily, I had certain connections that had been formed at that time, and it didn't happen. And when I got back to Oklahoma, you know, because I had gotten married while I was there too. I had gotten back to Oklahoma with my wife, and I really straightened my shit out. And then we found out that she was pregnant. I was going to have a daughter. And when I first held my daughter was the moment that I realized, like, none of it is about me anymore. Which I learned later on, of course, I do have to put myself first, you know, but that was the first time anything became more important than my own selfish desires. You know, like, fatherhood really saved me on a deep level. And that's when I started noticing my trajectory starting to shift, and everything started going up from there.
Wow. Every time I hear your story, and I already know your story and just the depth in which we've had conversations, but it's so incredible, and I acknowledge you for the work that you've done and what you've overcome in your life. And, you know, I think myself included with my own story, we have similar, different, but similar energy in terms of our background and the destruction that we found ourselves in the midst of, really just as a byproduct of wanting to be loved and having connection, right? And that ultimately leads us down this path of spiritual expansion and growth. But it's just, every time I hear your story, it's so touching, because I know people out there who might be in the midst of despair, in the midst of knowing that they need to make a change in life, can look at you and say, if someone who was in gangs and someone who chose violence as their first means of really connection, and someone who went through all of that from a broken home and all of those things can make it out and can be sitting here sharing their story, right? Just like you are today, and maybe I can do it too. So it's really beautiful to be able to sit here with you now on the other side of really the work that you do. And I think it's, from what I witness in you, is a true ability to meet people where they are without judgment, wherever they are, because you've walked the path and you've been there. And it's something that I really relate to too. So thank you for sharing that piece. And so you go through all of this, right? You have your daughter who's born, so she's now 10, which is amazing. But what did that transformation look like for you when you kind of wake up to, okay, this isn't about me anymore, where you're at that point, to now how I see you and how so many of us see you in the conversations that we have, of just the knowledge and the depth in which your knowledge goes, which I'm really excited to also dive into today. How did that shift happen for you to go from waking up to the fact that, okay, like, this isn't about me and I'm ready to change my life, to now sitting here and doing the really deep men's work that you do?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, like, really recognizing that there's a leader inside that never felt like a leader, right? It's like, I didn't feel like I had a hero growing up. You know, I always idolized these people, and then I realized, like, oh, I'm the one in the uniform now, and I'm the one with stripes, and people depend on me to put food on their table, to bring them home safe, to really instill the values and the virtues that forge leaders in the world, whether that's men or women, right? Because when I was in the military during that time, that was just when women were being introduced into combat. So there was a whole culture shift that was happening, where the military started waking up to, like, oh, you know, people need guidance no matter what gender or what color they are. Because besides the fact we're all soldiers, we're all leaders, you know, and that's really a big message. You know, we've talked about that, and it's like awakening that leader. You know, how does that leader walk? How does that leader talk? And I really had to embody that shit, because if I didn't, then people's lives were at risk. You know, my children were at risk. I'm not willing to put those things, you know, in the face of danger for my own selfish desires. And, you know, I learned that, you know, and that evolution through the military was great. You know, I, of course, wasn't the strongest at relationships. So when I deployed and got back, got a divorce, met my son's mom, got out then, you know, being now 100% permanently and totally disabled, you know, so that was more so the initiation into the path of healing, because I had the military telling me that I was broken, that I was useless, that I couldn't go to war, right? If I can't run, I can't fight. If I can't fight, then why are we paying you? Why do we have you around?
Yeah.
You know, and that it was that sense of purpose. You know, when I got ripped away from that, it's like, well, who am I now? What do I do now? It's like, oh, I'm big, I'm strong. Let me just go be a personal trainer. I can do that. And of course, that journey started.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're in with personal training now. And I know a lot of, from what I know of you, you focused on your body, you focused on strength. And then now you've really gotten into this deep sense of healing, and healing from an emotional standpoint, a spiritual standpoint. And so if someone is listening to this and they're like, I'm just now starting my journey, what can you share about how you started to go on your path of inner peace and inner healing?
So it's interesting because I got into fitness wanting to heal my body on a physical level. It only lasted a year, right? Leaned on the granite counter, snapped off, ripped my whole hand open. Now I don't have a hand. I can't shoot a gun, you know, holding a gun in my hand, not knowing what's next, you know, because I didn't see a reason for my meaning, for my being. And that's when I got that call, you know, from one of my clients, and she invited me into Landmark, which is more of the
Landmark was the
transformational
first intro. And so explain what Landmark is for people that might not know.
Yeah, so it's like an experiential and transformational experience that really shows you the stories you tell yourself, right? They have these different unique exercises and whatnot. MITT, Mastery and Transformational Training, another very similar one, Psy, all these different companies create these transformational seminars where you really get to see yourself, you know, without any judgment, you know, and of course there's some, you know, coercion in terms of sales and stuff that come with it.
I've also done Landmark too.
Yeah, there's some
but
stuff there.
But it can be really, really transformational for sure. What I'm hearing you say is like you really threw yourself into community of other people that were doing this work and placed yourself in a place where now you are getting to look at your stories. You're getting to be to have a mirror for where you get to illuminate kind of the shadow aspects of yourself. And I know you are really deep into like shadow work and things as well. So someone that is just now entering into this work, what would you have to say about getting to know your shadow?
I mean, even just kind of what we just said with Landmark and story, right? It's like, if you want to see your shadow, right, look at the story that you tell yourself that doesn't contain the shadow. Right.
So give us an example of that.
Right. So like people tell themselves the story that, oh, well, I'm this or I'm that. And really it's kind of a bypass to the deeper, more insidious part maybe. Right. So somebody might say that they're a liar, right? Or somebody might tell themselves the story that they're not worthy of love. So they keep pushing their partners away. When in reality, they enjoy the pain they put someone through. Right. So it's like this story that our conscious mind wants to tell us, when in reality, there might be something inside of us that desires to inflict pain. Right. Because if we are inflicting pain, it can either go two ways, inside or outside. And chances are, if we're pushing something away, that's immediately the energy of force, which is pushing away outside ourselves, which is actually the avoidance to what's inside of ourselves.
Okay, I love this. This is actually really interesting. Have you read the book Existential Kink?
Yep.
Okay, so that is what I'm thinking of. For those that are listening right now, Existential Kink is essentially a book that talks about the process of really the things that we say we don't want on some unconscious level. We do desire them because that is what we're seeking. So we're getting some unconscious benefit from, and that's what I'm hearing you say too, right? Is that there's a layer deeper. So, and I'd love to hear your take on this too. But to give a little context for people, I'm trying to think something maybe even from my own life. Like, you could say, oh, like I'm just somebody that's lazy, or I'm somebody that just procrastinates, or, you know, I just can't do this, whatever label, right? But unconsciously, actually, your procrastination label that you have is secretly keeping you small, or it's allowing you like the ability to not have to go for it so that you can avoid rejection or avoid some deeper thing. So it's actually this And I've personally gone through a process of like loving all parts of myself. So like loving the side of me that procrastinates, loving the side of me that
Yes.
feels not good enough, loving. And that's really the process that the existential kink book takes you through. But I'd love to hear your process in uncovering those unconscious benefits that you receive from the labels that maybe you once placed on yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So like one of those labels, right? And I play with that label now. It's a psychopath.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I'm in this work so deep now that I question all things in the tangible space of three-dimensional reality.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, because I don't adhere or subscribe to the status quo or the norm, inherently that makes me crazy by society standards.
Sure.
So what if I learn to love that shit?
Yeah.
Right? What if I can just laugh about my inner psychopath? Whoa, I just removed all these stories around how people are going to judge me and criticize me or how I don't fit in. This story I've been telling myself since I was like 6 years old when I first got bullied. Right? And that narrative started running, and then not feeling like I fit in, not feeling like I'm a cool kid, not feeling like anybody's going to love the real me or who I really am. But when I really start looking at this like dark, playful piece, right? Because there's a misconception that darkness is immediately associated to something negative.
Yeah.
Where inherently, right, both negative and positive hold value.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the judgment, and that's the stigma around it, right? So really being able to look that in the face, right? To learn to love the procrastinator, to learn to love the psychopath is really, to me, the journey of what true self-love looks like.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not just this, oh, I learned to love my inner child. Like, yes, that's a part of it. Yes. And there's the part that we can really go deep within ourselves and make the process so much easier if we just work with what's in the now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is so good. So the process, and I know that you love processes and taking people through an inner becoming. And so what would that process look like? So if someone's listening right now and they're like, maybe this is a foreign concept to them, right? Because we talk about self-love or self-care, and it's like, take a bubble bath, like love yourself. But and specifically for me on my journey, I'll speak for myself, like the process of self-love that you just spoke to has been the journey I've been on for the past year of like, not just loving myself in the moments that I'm doing really well or loving the good things about me, but also loving all parts, like loving every single bit. And that's the part that gets to become really or that can be really challenging for people, is when we're like, how could I love a specific, what do you mean love? These parts of me are not good. These parts of me are not creating the results I want in my life. And we're taught to condemn those parts. So what would be a process? What would it look like if someone is listening to this and they're like, what do you mean love all parts of myself? How do I even start doing that? What would you say to them?
Right. I mean, even just in a more like practical example, right? It's like if you, who's listening right now, were to just close your eyes and just bring awareness to your body, right? Even in this moment of exploring yourself, what comes up? What do you feel? What do you sense? Where in your body is it located? And if you feel an area that has tension, contraction, pressure, something that feels like it's taking away or trying to hide, put your hand there now. And then you breathe into that hand and simply recognize what happens in the conscious mind. Is there judgment? Is there shame? Is there some type of objection to what it could be or should be? And how can you just recognize and sense and see and feel it as it is without the judgment, without the shame, without the objection? And if you were to find this place of neutrality and willingness to simply just feel it, how does it shift? Where does it go? How does it move?
I'm like doing this as you're talking.
Yeah.
This is really cool.
Right? And it's this simple exploration. It doesn't need to look like any type of process, right? It can just be this experience where we get to recognize something that we might look at as inherently bad, when in reality, it's just a part of ourselves, right? And sometimes when we just bring it into the body or into a sensation without a story, it's so much easier. And why not simplify the process? Because we know You go so deep into this work where everything is like a clusterfuck inside of a dryer.
Yeah.
And it's on tumble dry repeat again and again and again. And we're coming, to the same stories, to the same conclusions, to the same insights, ceremony after ceremony after ceremony. And at what point does it just become simple?
Yeah. Yes. This is a big realization that I had literally this past weekend, of doing this work. I've been doing this work for 5 years, and people that are listening to this that might have done this work for a long time, right? It's like you said, the tumble dryer, like you almost get stuck on a loop, and you can go deep into the work and ask yourself, something that I realized that I want to share is that for 5 years, I've been asking myself the question, what is in my way? What is blocking me? What do I need to let go of? Where do I need to transform? But all of that has an undertone of like, I'm not enough, or something about me needs to change, or like it illuminates the quote unquote negative, right? Or what we perceive as negative. So instead, I went through a process. I was just in a retreat in Tulum this past weekend, and I went through this process of just asking myself, actually, how can I cultivate the warrior archetype within me? How can I just feel the power instead of asking what I need to let go of? How can I just cultivate the bigness that I feel? How can I expand my capacity for what I can hold? And I went through this breath work, which I know you do breath work a lot, and of just like feeling that power wash over me. And now that's becoming my new north, instead of constantly asking like, what is this thing I need to change, or this depth of this work, which is great and is helpful in, I think, certain arenas, and like there's certain time and place for that. And also just cultivating the other half, which is the light. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well. What I just shared of like cultivating the higher emotions as well.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm so glad you brought this up, cause in this work, right, everything works with release and replace. Right. And I like to say that awareness without action is pain. Right. Like awareness without action is pain. So we can go into the darkness, we can go into the shadow, we can illuminate these limitations that we have held on a conscious or subconscious or even unconscious level for a really long time. So the question is, what are you going to do with it? Right? Because it's not about just having the awareness, it's the rate of implementation that you're able to step into that bigness. Right? Like it happens in a moment's notice. From the moment of awareness to the moment of action, you have full command. You're empowered and connected and whole to know on a deep internal level without any external influence where you need to move, because your spirit knows, your soul knows. Right? And it's that magnetic and also gravitational effect into yourself, which becomes the process of illumination. Right? Illumination is always present, just as light and dark is. So the process of revealing and remembering to put all parts back together, back into the most unified sense of completion or state of completion. Action. Take action.
Okay. Pause and rewind and just listen to everything he just said again, because that was gold. So fire. And this is why I just love all of the conversations that we have, because the synergy that you have with all of this work and your perspective is just so incredible. It's such medicine. And yeah, wow. I even just want to sit with that for a moment for myself, of like, awareness without action is pain. And I've never heard it said that way before, but it's so true. And often I find, and at least for me and for a lot of my students too, my students that take Manifestation University are often newer to this work, because it's an incredible course with like self-development and spiritual principles. But like, if you want to apply and you want to just dive into a bunch of different modalities and different things and get a taste of it, that's really what it's for. And I find a lot of my students go on this almost arc of, they wake up to the work. And then they wake up to the fact that they need to take responsibility and personal responsibility for their entire life. And the actions that are present in their life are so habitual and so somatic in their automation that they have a newfound awareness, but they aren't able to fully change in their action yet. And it becomes this almost arc of like, I'm so excited. I'm going to change my life. I found the work. I've found healing. I'm doing all these things. And then it's this newfound awareness of, oh shit, I created every single thing in my life. And now I actually feel worse than I did when I started. And that really speaks to that awareness action gap that you're talking about. And I always say, keep on the path, because it takes a while for your nervous system and for those habitual patterns to break, because you first have to have the awareness. So can you speak to that? Because I know you're really into the somatic work as well, and like breaking the patterns and the action. How can someone go from the awareness to the action of actually changing their life while still having compassion for themselves and understanding that you might have practiced being a specific way for 20, 30 plus years, that also, you get to have compassion for yourself as you're breaking the habit of being yourself, as Dr. Joe Dispenza would say.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you spoke to like the personal responsibility, right? Yeah. And with personal responsibility comes integrity, right? Can I take responsibility and do my best to stay in integrity? Right? Even John Weiland's work, who I've done work with, speaks to this, right? Specifically in integrity of your word, to integrity of your body, to integrity of your mind, your thoughts, to integrity of your heart, and where your soul longs to be called, right? And this looks like a practical and very simple framework, right? I know that you just did a podcast with like polarity and dynamics, right? So like a masculine structure, right? To have a feeling or a sensation within that structure allows a more unified process, right? So it basically looks at, if you were to list out everything that you're aware of, that you're out of alignment, out of integrity, not taking full responsibility, and then you can bring more awareness, a deeper level of awareness, to whether it's in the mind, whether it's in the body, whether it's in the heart, whether it's in your word, right? And then creating one step to come closer to integrity. It doesn't mean you have to resolve the whole thing. Yeah. Right? Because even in science, right, and statistics of behavior change, you try to change one thing at a time, you have about a 95% success rate. Yeah. Add two things at the same time, you now have about a 35. Add a third thing at the same time, and you have less than 5% chance to actually create a sustainable model, right? Because it's rooted in sustainability. Yeah. So does your rate of implementation match your rate of sustainability? And if you can have a framework by design, which one is most important to you, right? What you consider to be sacred is what you prioritize. Okay. Right.
Oh, I love this. So I love how you speak. It's just like so fun. And let's bring it down to like someone listening to this. Okay. Step one, write out
an integrity inventory.
An integrity inventory. We love this. I love action steps. Okay, so write out every area in your life where you're out of integrity. And maybe if someone's like, I don't even know, right? Maybe you just like write out every area and tell me if you would agree with this. Areas of your life where you don't feel 100% fulfilled. And then you could probably see in that area where you're out of integrity.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, even we're on the same page. Perfect. So if someone's like, if it feels threatening to like write down, where's every area I'm out of integrity? Like, I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to sit down and do that exercise right now.
Welcome
Maybe
to
some of you, yeah. We have a savage sitting in this chair, okay? Writing out all the areas where you don't feel 100% satisfied. Yeah. And then maybe picking, what I hear you say is, what's the most sacred to you? So to me, what I hear when you say that is, what is the thing that is the most important to you to change first?
Yes.
So if we're going to do a sustainable model, so, right, like we want lasting change here. We want to change our life and we want it to change every area, but maybe not try to do health, wealth, and relationships all at once. So pick, and what I tell my students to do is like, pick the one area, right? In Manifestation University, they pick either health, wealth, or relationships, and then they're put into smaller accountability groups based on what they chose. Because I say, you can do this work in every single area of your life. It's rinse and repeat work, right? Asking yourself deep questions, gaining an awareness around it, like shifting, what is it? There's all these things that you can do in each area. But if you pick the thing that is closest to your heart in the now, or if you changed this aspect of your life, how would it automatically change the other areas?
Right.
So some people are like, oh, I need to get an integrity with my health first. Or, you know what? I really need to have that conversation with my spouse, because if I'm out of integrity here, like I'm going to go and binge in the pantry. I just know, right? Like there's things, it depends on each individual person. But what I hear you say, write down each area where not 100%, and pick the area where if you changed in one area, it would affect the others, or what's the most closest to your heart, what's the most sacred for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking at in that area, okay, so where am I out of integrity, and coming up with action steps of what is something that I can get 1% more in integrity in this space.
Exactly.
Okay.
1% at a time.
Yeah.
Right? Because, right? In the work, it's like, oh, I just became aware of everything. I need to change everything in my life.
Right.
Right? These are the people who come out of ayahuasca ceremonies and leave their fucking marriage.
Yeah.
Who don't know how to integrate the work because they just had all these massive downloads, AKA thoughts, that they needed to do.
Yeah.
Right? Versus just looking at it and saying, why am I unhappy in my marriage?
Yeah.
Why am I not 100% fulfilled in my marriage? And where on my side of the street do I have to clean up? And before I make a rash decision, or life-altering decision, I should say, when I clean my side up first, AKA do my shadow work, does this actually bring the relationship or whatever it is back into integrity, back into alignment, back into fulfillment? Potentially, because everything is just a mirror.
Right.
Like we spoke to the community, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's just mirroring back to you. Either one, you're not expressing your desires, you're not expressing your fears, or you're not putting boundaries in place. Whether they're internal or external boundaries.
Yeah.
That's it. That simple.
So good. So good. And so true. This is like really actionable step. Guys, definitely do this exercise, okay? Do this exercise. And you touched on something that's I find really fascinating. The deeper I go into the spiritual communities as well, and I'm all down for like having all the conversations. Like I don't shy away from anything here on the podcast. And something that I've found in deep spiritual communities is, one is like the addiction to doing the work over and over and over again instead of just letting it be good. And the second is what you just touched on now, which is I'm going to do all the ayahuasca ceremonies. I'm going to do all of the things. And then I'm going to either go back and blow up my life, or I need to do 12, 13, 15, 20 ceremonies. And it's that, again, awareness to action gap with the implementation. So have you seen that? I know you've gone deep into a lot of ceremonial spaces, and specifically with plant medicine. And I would love to hear you speak to, why do you think that is?
I'm chuckling because this is going to sting for some people.
Bring it.
Right? And this is just my perspective, my opinion, my observations. And there's two parts of this equation. Number one, the people who are holding or hosting the ceremonies, and maybe being out of integrity with how to help people prepare and integrate it with grounded intentions and grounded reality, right? Because a lot of things in like plant medicine or in communities such that claim, they're spiritual, right? When in all actuality, everything is. When we put some type of label on it, or to determine it as something that is already inherently there, it just creates more separation, right? So how do you bring more unified completion, right? Preparation, experience, integration. So that's one side of the equation, right? Not to make it this separate thing, like it has to be this separate type of experience other than just another life experience.
Yeah.
Because that kind of inflates energetically what it is. And it kind of creates this egoic attachment on an unconscious level, right? I'm going into this community that labels, or I determine as a spiritual community, therefore I am adopting this idea of who I am as spiritual.
Yeah.
When inherently that's already there. Why do that? Why create that separation and that hierarchy in this thing called life?
Yeah.
Right? So that's one side. The second side, and this is what I've personally experienced, right? And I'll speak to my own, is that when I found myself chasing experiences, there was no difference than chasing the next high for heroin.
Mm.
It's the next fix. It's the
Yep.
next high. It's the next release, right? The release, release, release. There's this obsession in today's society and culture about releasing,
Yeah.
right? Versus remembering, right? So when we chase these experiences, it's important to check in with, am I avoiding my reality? Am I avoiding my current reality? Am I chasing a high, or am I trying to quantum leap into another reality because I am unable to consciously face what I'm going through right now with the resources I have?
Yeah.
And if you do determine that you do not have the resources to confront it and you need support, that is a much different approach than chasing down the next ceremony just for the sake of awakening.
Yeah. Oh, yes, bars. This is so
Bars.
good. Bars. It's so good. And I bring this to the discussion because and this is without judgment. I think everybody is doing the best they can, and myself included. I've found myself in loops of addicted to the work, addicted to, I need to go within and I need to do the deeper thing. I need to go to the next thing. I need to join the next program. I need to be in the next community, when really sometimes the deepest spiritual work I've found is just being able to sit with yourself. And that really circles back to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, is, can you love where you're at? And by loving where you're at, it means loving all parts of you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the most challenging thing that we get to do spiritually and that we get to walk, is that, like, rather than having the spiritual ego or the, it's like, I'm in these things and I'm doing these ceremonies and I'm better than that. That's a whole thing. And then there's this, I need to keep going and I need to go deeper and I need to, it's like that attachment again to, I totally relate to when I had 8 years of drug and alcohol abuse too. And like that energy that created that was the same that was displaced in, taking Adderall and working a ton. Yeah. And then, when I stopped doing that and I really let go of all my addictions, like, I think we're always walking a path, but with alcohol, I no longer drink, or with, vaping and smoking and all of these things that, like, it's like, if I could just sit with myself and allow exactly where I am right now. So anybody listening to this, you could sit with yourself and notice and do the exercise that Nathan talked about. Like, where do you notice the tightness or the feeling in your body? Like, can you just sit with being so okay with what is, without the seeking, without the attachment, without the having to know more, do more? Like, can we just be and love exactly that in this moment?
I'm so glad you're talking about this right now.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
So what comes up for you?
Because I agree with you, right? It's not even from a place of judgment. It's just from a place of recognition.
Yeah.
Right? And it's this, right? I've spoken of the remembrance again and again and again, right? And it's also this, we're doing the best with what we have. And is there more?
Mm-hmm.
Can I be of the more, in the more, of the all? And can I also call myself to a higher level of greatness that I hadn't yet realized until I was able to sit there with what I have, right? Because I think it's really common, especially when somebody starts healing, right? Their practices and their tools become the overrides to their own self-discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just shake all this stuff off so I don't have to experience it.
Right.
Let me go into breath work so I can just let this go.
Yeah.
Right? Let me just do, this meditation so I only have to concentrate on one thing, versus that recognize all the things that come up, right? That come up in my body. And yes, those things happen in those circumstances. It's just really important to check in. That's why I had to ditch all my morning practices, because I couldn't sit with myself in the morning.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, man. Like, especially when I started on my entrepreneurship journey, right? And, I'm 7 years in right now, still a baby, right? In terms of entrepreneurship and the business world. And I would just have these racing thoughts, things to do, the to-do list, the things that I needed to check off, the people I needed to call, the people I needed to message, the instant checking my phone first thing when I wake up. And I found morning practices and I started doing those. And then I was like,
Which
oh,
were
this
what?
feels great.
Really quick. So what were the morning practices? So people know.
Started with meditation, then went into breath work. From breath work, then I started going into emotional release work, catharsis, emotional release work, which kind of fell in line with like Osho dynamic meditations.
Which is, for people listening.
Is Osho, one of the teachers, philosophers of this type of work, right? It kind of looks like a heavy bout of catharsis or breath work, then catharsis, then movement,
which is
then
like
stillness
yelling.
meditation. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got
like it's like 10 minutes of breath work, 10 minutes of cathartic yelling, 10 minutes of cathartic movement work, and then 30 minutes of stillness.
Okay.
It was wild.
Yeah.
It was powerful work.
Wow.
And now it's become, right, all these practices I'm speaking to, right? Breath work, meditation. I mean, hell, working out at the gym is a spiritual practice, you know? So all these practices, breath, sound, movement, super easy to remember those.
Yeah.
You know, I really had to check in with, you know, at a certain point in time, it took me about 5 or 6 years to be like, holy shit, am I like using these just to feel better? Right? What's the difference of me using this tool, right, versus taking a hit of heroin, right? It made the pain go away temporarily. And then I would use my work and my business to distract myself. So that way, when I was home alone at night or on the weekends and really with myself, I'd catch myself trying to hit people up or finding things to do. And like, it's that busy addiction, right?
Yep.
Trying to stay busy. And then when I got rid of the busyness and when I got rid of the practices and distractions, that's when I really had to look at, right? Are these just overriding and am I using these intentionally?
Yeah.
Right? As they're designed, or have I just simply found another pathway of escapism?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So good. So good. So true. And everyone listening to this, what I'm hearing and what keeps coming to me is the only way out is through. You know, you can't escape it in heroin and you can't escape it in all of the practices. It's sitting with yourself. Do less. Like, do less and be like, and be. And that's been the most spiritual thing in my life, is like allowing myself to do less. And as a byproduct, you actually end up being more. And more downloads come, and more thoughts, right? More downloads, whatever we want to call them. And the ability to take action, and the ability to simplify it all. And that's what I hear you saying too. And it's so funny because knowing what you know, I'm aware that you know because of how many conversations we've had, it's really incredible. And then even just hearing you say like the simplicity of it, and just like allowing it to be simple. And you did mention one thing that this is probably a whole other podcast, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. Through breath, sound, and movement, and that practice that you did have when you were doing it. This is something that I've really gotten into. I've gotten into the deep work that you're super aware of that I haven't even shared up on the podcast as much, specifically with sound and movement. And energetic transmutation has been a really deep path of mine as of recently. And for those listening, essentially all that is like emotion is energy in motion, and energy that is brought up. And what I've realized is that I have big fucking emotions, and I feel like you do too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very,
okay.
very.
Yeah. So we have big emotions, right? All right. So people listening to this, if you have big emotions, don't shame yourself for it. I used to shame myself for having really big emotions, and now I realize that all that means is that I have extremely enormous capacity, as do you. And it's just capacity that isn't directed with intention. And through the process of bringing up my emotions deliberately through certain practices, I've been able to actually learn how to then transmute that energy through sound, through yelling, through catharsis, through crying, through movement. And then I move that energy and I turn it into something else, which is what I was talking about with like bringing up the warrior.
Yeah.
And that is like some ninja shit. Okay. Like it is really cool. And I know that you know about this work. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, man. Oh, this is one of my favorite things to talk about.
Yeah.
It really is. It's just energy, right? It's just stored energy, right? Because that's
Any
really
emotion that you feel.
any emotion.
Yeah.
It's just experiences that are layered on top of one another, right? Our mind is simply the thing that made it a meaning, which we label as the feeling, right? But the energy and motion, right? Because we have 6 gateway emotions, which then translate into more mature aspects of the self,
What are the 6 gateway emotions?
right? So we have happiness, we have sadness, we have anger, we have fear, we have surprise or shock, and then we have disgust or shame, right? So those are our gateways, right? In which the joy or happiness becomes peace, right? The sadness becomes gratitude. The anger becomes willpower, right? The fear becomes courage. The surprise becomes wonder. And then the disgust becomes love.
Wow.
Right? So we look at these gateway emotions and how they manifest through expression because we feel it, we sense it, and how does it move to where it matures over time through our actions? I feel disgust and shame, and now how can I act? First, moving it, right? We talked about releasing it and then replacing it with love. How can we move anger, release anger, and replace it with will? How can we release fear and replace it with courage? Through action.
Yeah.
Simple formula.
Yeah.
Breath, sound, movement. Get it out.
So breathe, make noise with sound. I'm like dialing this down for the people. Okay. Breathe. Literally, like, that's nervous system regulation, or breath work, like bringing it up. Sound. So crying or yelling or some type of, like, that's the
Not necessarily. I would consider the catharsis, the expression of catharsis, the movement.
Okay.
Right? So the sound, and even just for those who are listening, it's very simple.
Yeah.
Right? So you breathe into it, you have your hand there, you start breathing. And then you give it a sound, right? Whether it's just a just a hum, right? Give it a vibration without the full release, right?
Okay.
Because sometimes that might be all that you need.
Yeah, so true.
Right? So it's being mindful of how we express catharsis, right? Because when we move into the state of catharsis or extreme expression, what happens is that we might not have the capacity and we've unconsciously exceeded our threshold. Because if we look around society right now, we have what I would consider to be an adrenaline addiction.
Right.
Right? And people are blowing out their adrenals and they're working all day and they're going in the gym and picking up 400 pounds, working a full-time job, yet they think that their nervous system can then handle a catharsis on top of it.
Okay.
Right? It's to be mindful of where our threshold is at.
So
and our
just
capacity.
allow what needs to come out and don't force it, is what I'm
Exactly.
hearing.
The most organic and authentic expression.
Okay.
Right? And that can look like a tear. That could look like wailing and flailing and all the things.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, like take a breath, give it a sound. If it feels right for you, keywords for you, where you are at, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then to be seen in it is really important, to have that support from the community, right?
Yeah.
Because the immunity is in community.
Yeah.
And if we're just hiding it, it's kind of like, how do we integrate it? Right? How do we bring it into the community and then speak to that experience and then empower someone else who might be going through something similar?
Well, so before we go off on community, so we have breath, we have sound. If someone wants to move energy, breath, sound, movement. And I have dance party. I mean, we had a dance party right before this podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
It's all energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the movement, right? Dancing, playing, jumping, shaking.
Yeah.
Temper tantrums.
Yeah.
Jumping up and down.
Yeah.
Jumping jacks, push-ups, right? It doesn't have to look any certain type of way, just whatever is real for you in the moment.
Yeah. So allow yourself. So what I'm hearing, and for people listening to this, how you can apply this to your life. So if you have big emotions and big feelings, breathe into it. Allow the expression and whatever feels natural for you in that moment. Don't force it, but allow the sound to come out in whatever way, and then move that energy and just watch what happens. That's all I'm going to say is watch what happens. I'm not going to tell you what happens. Just begin to create an awareness and notice how you feel before and notice how you feel after you allow the energy to move.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a really big piece in my life, and something that you've even inspired me on through our conversations and the deep, deep work that you do. And the last thing that we can kind of touch on is what you just said, which is having the community around you that can hold you in your transformation. That's been really big for me. I know it's been big for you as well. We have gone to retreats together and attended retreats together. I'm hosting my first retreat. This will be airing after my first retreat. At this point, we'll have a second retreat already launched, which is really cool. So being in community where people can hold you and experience, I think, is really important. And I'd love to hear you speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to do our work alone, right? Because that definitely has its benefits, right? Mm-hmm. After all my ceremonies that I'll facilitate, right? I'll even say, you're open to share, or you are equally as open to hold the gold, right? If this is something just for you that you'd like to implement on your own first, like absolutely, I think everybody should to some degree. And there's just a different experience. There's a different outcome when community is involved.
Yeah.
Because so many people out there feel like they have to go through their pain alone.
Yeah.
And right, because of that is why we see the numbers of suicides that we do. It's why we see soldiers, right, coming home and taking their lives because they feel like nobody understands.
Yeah.
Or they might feel like it's too much, or they're too much, or not many people can relate. And as we've both experienced, that is very much not the case.
Yeah.
Especially when you're surrounded with like-minded individuals who believe in your vision.
Right.
And believe in your greatness.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. Yeah. Community is incredibly important, and it's been a really beautiful healing experience for me to know that I can be seen, heard, and not alone. And for anybody out there listening, I really encourage you to go outside of your comfort zone and to find the community that resonates with you, whether that's the It's Fucking Spiritual community, whether that's your community with Spiritual Psychopath and the work that you're doing, or any community and any in-person events, retreats, like different things, whether that's this one or any others. Like, it's truly changed my life to not only implement this work on a daily basis, because it's two parts, right? It's doing the work on your own, but it's also being able to have people that can hold you and see you in your transformation and tell you that you are not alone in what it is that you feel. And we heal through community. We heal through story. That's why I love that you share your story and what you've come, what you've done in the world and the way that you've transformed. I think it allows people to see themselves in you. And that's why I have such high value of sharing my own story, so that people know that they're not alone. And so thank you so much, Nathan, for sharing all of your wisdom on the podcast today, and all of so many nuggets of practical things that people can do and exercises. We really went deep. We talked about a lot of high level stuff that's like, not your just average self-development and set your goals, right?
Yeah.
Like we really went deep. And I truly believe that this is the next level. And this is the level that I've been stepping into. And this is also the level that we're taking the podcast. So thank you for being a pioneer of speaking on those things, especially here on this platform. And I would love to just ask one last question. If you could just drop in to your heart and give us one last piece of advice or wisdom that's just coming through for you right now in this moment.
Your darkness is your Dharma.
Oh, that's good. Your darkness is your Dharma. Listen to that, integrate it, repeat it to yourself. I'm gonna say that to myself. I love that. It's so true. Put it on a t-shirt.
Already great. Planning it.
All right, beautiful, awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Nathan, for coming on and sharing all of your light, all of your darkness, and everything in between. Where can people connect with you and find you?
All the socials at Nathan Kohlerman.
Beautiful.
And then they can go to my website, newintention.com. It'll be in the show notes, I'm assuming.
Yes.
And I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the whole It's Fucking Spiritual community. I fucking love you guys. You ladies. All of you.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. We're on brand. We have very similar brands, and it's great.
Fucking brand.
On fucking brand. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. If you loved this episode, definitely share it. Tag me, tag Nathan, tag the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. And thank you for tuning in. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to the It's Fucking Spiritual podcast. I am so glad that you're here. And if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to share this with a friend that you feel needs to hear it. And if you are really feeling the love and support for this show, this podcast thrives off of your listens and your reviews. So I would love if you could leave us an honest review. We would love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your questions, and it helps us get this podcast in the hands of more people and would mean so much to me to receive your support. So thank you.